They have won the battle for that. So it is now up to you to figure out how well you're going to integrate with the way that your buyers research and make purchase decisions. And when it comes to data center. Hey there, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. I want to welcome you to today's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A, a weekly live stream dynamic web show sponsored by the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. This series tackles the most pressing challenges faced by go-to-market sales, marketing, customer success, product, and channel partnership professionals in and around the data center industry. This week, we're going to look at lead generation tips for Tier 3 data centers. Then we'll shift gears and talk about business development strategy for data center efficiency, cooling, and system architecture. Then we'll talk about what you need to do to optimize your sales and marketing to mission-critical facilities. After that, we'll look at how to encourage adoption of new data center and cloud infrastructure technologies. We'll talk about what it takes to get your data center AEs, your account executives, to the correct person within an organization. And we'll close out by looking at some tips on how to reach potential customers for data center colocation. So without any further ado, let's jump right in and talk about some lead generation tips for Tier 3 data centers. What's most important when you're thinking about how to generate the perfect leads, how to scale up your lead gen around your company's data center space, your company's data center services, is to get crystal clear on where your company can win the best, where your clients are going to have the smoothest onboarding experience, where they're going to be happy with provisioning, where they're going to be thrilled with your network operations center, where they're going to be fantastic sources of referrals, where they're going to be great for expansion revenue, cross-selling, singing your praises in reviews, as well as in case studies. Once you have a strong idea of where you can win best, then you want to build your go-to-market strategy, your sales enablement, your lead generation strategy, your lead nurturing strategy. But it's so important to first focus on what it is that you do best. Because when it comes to selling data center services, whether you're a single location, multi-location, whether you have significant coverage throughout a country, throughout several countries, that makes a world of difference about the kinds of clients that you're looking to generate leads for. For a single location, co-location facility, it's usually a very different kind of client than a publicly traded REIT, real estate investment trust company, with dozens of data centers. Different minimums, different scope, different targeting, different sales process, different contract terms, all the different compliance requirements, vastly, vastly different. So what's most important is to be self-aware and very realistic about what you do best, where you win most often, where customer success, where your account management really hits it out of the park and has tremendous success with clients. And then working backwards from there and building a go-to-market strategy, getting crystal clear on your ideal client profile, and getting crystal clear on the roles within that ideal client profile, the buyer personas, the most important buyer persona, the primary buyer persona, the second most important buyer persona, the secondary buyer persona. And usually it's a matter of prioritizing on what's going to monetize best, what's going to be the most profitable for your company, what's the most strategically important. And at the kind of Venn diagram intersection of all of that is really understanding what your capabilities are today and what your product roadmap calls for in the near future, and making sure that all of your lead gen strategy is built around that. Next question is, what is the best business development strategy for data center energy, efficiency, cooling, and system architecture? The best business development strategy, taking into account energy efficiency, cooling, and system architecture, and obviously cooling because of the nature of how hot AI chips run, GPUs run, and utility power constraints going forward is an enormous part of success of being able to scale any kind of enterprise data center or data center operator kind of business model going forward. So one, it's being aware of constraints around your business, escalating cost structure, limitations, being aware of what's coming in the very, very near future as we move into so much of the data center industry being driven by high performance computing and AI, and moving to artificial generative intelligence in the coming years, and smart cities. All of this is going to make cooling and efficiency front and center. But what at the end of the day, what it largely comes down to is figuring out what your business model is, what industries you're going to do best selling into and servicing, and then working backwards from there with your current capabilities and where you anticipate going in the near future, and figuring out who are your best clients today, who are your best clients in the near future, and how do you get more of them. The second part with all of this is recognizing that the way that people research and make their purchase decisions in and around the data center industry is so different today than it was as recently as 5 years ago. What's changed? Well, WFH, working from home, and those years of lockdowns during the pandemic and everything, we know that digital transformation accelerated a ton. We also know that every time a baby boomer 75-year-old CEO retires, it's very unlikely that they would potentially be replaced by another 75-year-old CEO. What that means is over time, as your management team goes into its next iteration and there's new leadership that's coming in, it's far more likely that as you end up with more Gen X and more millennial and more Gen Z and eventually Gen Alpha in influencer stakeholder kind of roles within these different kinds of companies, the buyer's journey is going to get ever more self-service and ever more digital. Gartner came out with some research a year or two ago that found that 83% of the B2B buyer's journey, which includes researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing, is now over before you get to meet a prospect. 83%. So if we think about sports analogies, if you think about a basketball game or a football match, the game's like, we're deep into the fourth quarter already before you get into the stadium to get to talk to prospects. If you think about baseball analogies, we're like in the eighth, almost the ninth inning already before you ever get to meet a prospect. What that means is your business development strategy needs to focus on doing whatever it takes to be the one who's educating and building trust with prospects in the early and middle stage of their research and decision-making process, and the awareness and the consideration stage of the buyer's journey. So 5 or 10 years ago, if I was answering this question, a lot of sales professionals would have poo-pooed the whole idea of getting involved in content and thought leadership, and they would have said, that's marketing's job, they'll take care of it. Wrong. If you as a sales professional, if you as a customer success professional, as a product professional, as a channel professional, if you need to have good leverage during that sales process so people actually want to talk with you as opposed to you begging for attention, it is absolutely critical that they see you as a teacher, as a subject matter expert, as a consultant, as an advisor, and not just somebody that's begging for a few minutes to do your pitch. If that's the way they see you, as somebody who's begging, literally willing to bribe them with a gift card to do your pitch, you are in a world of it's time to reinvent yourself. Because nobody needs somebody to read what's on the website to them anymore. They don't even need to read it anymore. They can ask Siri, Alexa, Cortana, Copilot. There's dozens of these great personal assistants that will literally read your website and 5 or 10 other websites that are compared in front of them simultaneously, cutting out the role of the sales and CS person being the gatekeeper of information. The search engine, social media, personal assistants, chatbots, they have won the battle for that. So it is now up to you to figure out how well you're going to integrate with the way that your buyers research and make purchase decisions. And when it comes to data center cooling, efficiency, systems architecture, energy, it's all about what's in it for them. And in order for your business development strategy to provide value for them, you need to be interesting to them by providing unique insights about how other businesses like theirs are navigating these challenges, so you can diagnose before you describe, so you can build authority before you ask them for something in return. That's the key to developing a great business development strategy for data center energy, efficiency, cooling, and system architecture. Next question. How do we optimize sales and marketing for mission critical facilities? What's the key to optimizing sales and marketing for mission critical facilities? Fantastic question. The key thing is we first and foremost need to identify what kinds of mission critical facilities, what exactly is our ideal client profile for marketing and selling to mission critical facilities. Um, do we sell to hospitals? Do we sell to emergency operations centers? Do we sell to data centers? All of that is incredibly important to figuring out how we're going to define our ideal client profile. I know this because I've given talks at conferences like Critical Facilities Summit, where data center is an important part of that, but it's not the only part of that. So, first and foremost, we need to give super tight about defining what kinds of mission critical facilities, what geographical parameters, what size. Do we have a target account list driving account based marketing, ABM, or account based selling that focuses our sales team's efforts? Then and only then, once we've gotten really tight about what kinds of facilities, where we can do best with our current products and services for those kinds of facilities, then and only then are we in a position to work backwards and figure out how we're going to go to market for those kinds of facilities, how we're going to identify where they are, what size, what industry, a specific finite list of those, and then within those facilities, who are the key people that we need to be building a relationship with. Those are the buyer personas. A buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal client based on some research and educated speculation about their goals, their challenges. What if they get right? We'll get them a huge promotion. What if they screw up? We'll get them the opposite of a promotion and put their job or potentially their career in jeopardy. Once you have consensus on that, it becomes much easier to become interesting to them by creating content that helps them navigate all of the decisions that are most important to that kind of stakeholder in a mission critical facility. Ebooks, blogs, videos, downloadables, not to get super meta here, but podcasts and webinars, live video experiences, on-demand video experiences. We know a huge amount of content consumption has moved into that world. We also know a huge amount of content consumption has moved towards self-service. Think about it. Over the last 5 years, have you, when it comes to your own personal purchases at home, when it comes to the purchases that you make at work, have you gotten more interested in speaking with humans or less interested in speaking with humans? Have you become more interested in self-service or less interested in self-service when it comes to booking hotels, booking flights, car service, catering, groceries, ordering computers, ordering servers, provisioning cloud services, whatever it is? All of the research from all of the big think tanks, like Gartner, for example, found that 83% of the buyer's journey is now over before you get to meet a prospect. 83%. So what do we do when we're getting squeezed so tightly that our sales and marketing folks are only involved in 17% of the research and decision-making process? Well, we don't sit back and say, ignore us, we want to be silent. No. We look at what exactly are they looking for. They're looking to be educated about their goals and their challenges and find solutions. They don't know your company exists yet. They're not even sure they know what your solution category is and that exists yet. All they know is there's a goal or a question that they need an answer for. There's a challenge, that's something that's stressing them out that they need to figure out. The better job you can do at arriving early on in that buyer's journey as possible, you're the one that gets to stay with them throughout the process. You're the one that ultimately gets to shape the criteria at which they evaluate all of the other options. But if you just sit on your butt and you think that business is going to continue the way it has over the past 10 or 20 years, nonsense. The world has changed. We need to adapt our sales and marketing strategy to that if you're going to be successful in marketing, sales, customer success, product, channel strategy, your full go-to-market. when it comes to working in and around mission critical facilities. Before we jump into our next question, we'll just take a brief break here with a message from our sponsor.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
Awesome. Okay, so we're now going into the second half of this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream show. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. So the next question that we're going to cover today is, how do you encourage adoption of new data center and cloud infrastructure technology? What does it take to encourage adoption of new data center and cloud infrastructure technology? First and foremost, we need to put our product management hat on. We need to figure out what it is about our data center technology and our cloud infrastructure technology that gets our ideal clients excited. Why do they buy it? What is the job to be done that we're actually doing? And when we say job to be done, a lot of companies don't truly understand what business they're in. What is the job that your best ideal clients are hiring your company to do? And by doing so, effectively hiring you to do that job, what alternatives are they effectively firing that they're not going to be hiring to do that job? Once you have a strong handle on the job to be done, which, by the way, if that's completely new to you, I'd encourage you to read The Innovator's Dilemma and look up jobs theory from the late Clayton Christensen. He was a professor at Harvard Business School who popularized a lot of this over the last 10, 15, 20 years before he passed away, is the idea that technology companies need to be extraordinarily aware of what business they're actually in, why their best clients buy their company, and effectively hiring their product or service. And when they hire their product or service, what alternatives are they implicitly firing that they won't be moving ahead with? So once you understand why people buy your data center and cloud infrastructure technology, then you're in a position to figure out why your best clients have adopted that technology. And once you have that figured out, effectively what you're able to do is to build product marketing and sales enablement materials that inform your entire strategy on what it's going to take to inform adoption. When you do that as well, not only will you want to deal with those asset creations, the content asset creations that are pre-sales, you more than likely also need to create some post-sales assets for onboarding, for customer success, for customer marketing, for sales expansion, account management. So getting a really strong handle about why you do what you do, the job that you're actually doing for your clients, documenting that in some great case studies, which ideally you'd want to capture in video, because you can always repurpose from video into a PDF or blog or carousel or what have you. Once you have a really strong handle on that, that's how you can begin to encourage adoption and meeting people basically where they are. Once you know why your technology exists, you typically figure out a go-to-market strategy that involves defining your ideal client profile. What are the companies, where are they located, what are their size, and what industry they're located in? Once you have that ideal client profile defined and you know the company, for any kind of considered sales process, more than likely your sales and marketing team at some point are going to lean towards something like account-based marketing, a defined targeted account list that you're looking to go after. And once you know that defined top 100, top 500 accounts, whatever it is that you're targeting, then you're trying to figure out who are the most important people in that account that it's critical to build awareness and encourage adoption with. So let's say, for example, you're targeting manufacturing companies that need data center and cloud infrastructure. Perhaps within those manufacturing companies, you want to reach a CTO and a CFO, a CTO and a CFO. So maybe your CTO is your primary buyer persona, the most important stakeholder, and maybe the CFO is your second most important stakeholder. And guess what? When it comes to each of those kinds of stakeholders, they care about different stuff. When you build out your buyer persona document, you will inevitably discover there might be some overlap, but most of their goals and most of their challenges are going to be unique for each of that kind of role. So when it comes to encouraging adoption with the CTO, it's different kind of messaging, it's different kind of educating, it's different kind of trust building than you will do with the CFO. But what's super critical to remember is whether you're looking to build relationships with CFOs or CTOs, they both navigate the buyer's journey vastly differently today than they would have as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. Everything is so digitally driven. Gartner found 83% of this journey is over before you get to meet prospects. And McKinsey discovered it's almost everyone that now wants a digital journey. Like 70 to 80% of B2B decision makers now prefer a digital journey. How do you get involved in that digital journey? It's meeting them where they are. Early on, they do not know that your company exists. They don't even know that your category exists. All they know is there's a goal they're trying to figure out a solution for, to solve. There's a question that they have. There's a challenge. There's something that's stressing them out, and they're looking for answers. And the best answer that gets in as early as possible is given the crown, is given the ribbon, is given the trophy virtually, effectively, implicitly as the guru, as the expert, as the trusted advisor, as the teacher, as the consultant, as the thought leader. And the better job you can do that and getting in as early as possible, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to stay with them throughout their entire journey. You're going to shape the criteria under which they evaluate all of the other solutions, and you'll almost for certainly be on the short list. And in many situations, you may be the entire short list. In other words, if you do this well enough, you will have neutralized all of the competitive factors at work. So by the time they're at the decision stage, they know that your company is the only one to go to. So when it comes to encouraging adoption with people in awareness and consideration and decision stages of the journey, that's how to do it. In terms of post-purchase, especially in any kind of recurring revenue managed services type of situation, onboarding, customer success, account management also needs to adopt a similar philosophy of figuring out what it takes to get someone initial value, intended value, and extended value so that you develop a strategy to knock it out of the park with customer success and long-term retention, long-term loyalty to encourage adoption of your company's data center and cloud infrastructure technology. Next question up we have is, how do data center account executives, how do AEs in data centers get to the correct person within an organization? This is a fantastic question, because in most cases, as an AE, as an account executive or sales development rep, and SDR, you are more than likely selling into mid-market and enterprise companies. If you're selling into small and mid-sized companies, you have a different set of challenges. The challenge in a small and mid-sized company is what is actually too small. In many cases, for companies in and around the data center industry, it's very common to say, okay, SMBs, but they need to be at least 10 employees. They need to be at least €1 million, $1 million US, £1 million, whatever it is, and a certain amount of revenue to actually be able to afford the solution. So it may be SMB, it may be small and medium-sized business, or the first cousin of that SME, small and medium-sized enterprise, but there may be certain guardrails on certain revenue targets or number of employee headcount or something like that. And if you're using LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Campaign Manager for ads targeting or something like that, it's very, very straightforward to get access to that company headcount information. A little less straightforward and a little less reliable on the revenue part. But let's first and foremost be clear that let's consider primarily mid-market and enterprise, because with a small and medium-sized business, it's very, very likely that any foot in the door is very close to a decision maker. There's not going to be a lot of layers. There's not going to be a lot of red tape to get from the intern to the C-level to even the CEO thing. More than likely, the intern is reporting to somebody who reports to the C-level or reports to a decision maker, someone that's super close to that in a small business. Let's talk about the mid-market and the enterprise situation, though. So what's super critical in the mid-market and enterprise, one is to have a really tightly defined ideal client profile. Second is to have a really good account-based marketing list so you know the specific companies that you're trying to build this traction with. And then within those companies, who are the two most important kinds of people that you need to build relationships with? Like, for example, in data center services, it may be the head of facilities, it may be the head of technology, it may be the head of compliance, it may be a finance person, but more than likely, there is a defined person who would be the absolute best person to get a foot in the door with, and then the second best person. Once you have that, then you essentially need to build your entire go-to-market playbook, your sales enablement, your content marketing, your thought leadership around getting in as early as possible with those stakeholders, with the primary and the secondary most important stakeholders in those companies. That's the key part with all of that, is being super clear on who the companies are, where they're located, what their size is, what industry they're in, and then who are who's the most important category of person you want to get in front of, the primary buyer persona, and who's the second most important kind of person that you want to get in front of. And usually those tough targeting decisions are made based on where you think your company can be most successful from a post-purchase customer success, onboarding, expansion, case study kind of perspective. What has the smoothest sales cycle, the best unit economics, what's the most profitable. So all of those things kind of blended together in a Venn diagram. So the correct person in a company is going to depend on your current products and services today, what's on your immediate roadmap, where you can be most successful. Once you've identified that, it's all about delivering as much value as you possibly can for that prioritized person throughout their entire journey, getting in as early as possible. Because by default, if you keep doing the things the way you've been doing them the last 5 or 10 years, you will more than likely miss the first 83% of the buyer's journey. You will only be involved in the final 17% of researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing, when most brand loyalty has already been decided in favor of someone else. In other words, there's 28 touch points in between when someone first has a goal or a challenge or a problem that they need to solve and when they actually purchase. The more of those touch points that you as a person, your team, your company is actively involved in, the more you surround that person with fantastic educational content that shares incredibly valuable insights about how other companies and other stakeholders in those companies navigate these same decisions, the smoother job, the better job, the more likely it is that you are for sure on the short list and will actually, in many cases, be the entire short list by the time they get to the decision stage. So if you want to make sure that your account executives get to the correct person, a lot of the stuff that they used to disregard as being marketing's job is no longer just marketing's job. It's vital that your account executive show up in the awareness and the consideration stage and do awareness building and consideration building long before they beg for the time to do a pitch. So that means, by definition, you need to train your account executives so they look more like Big Four consultants, so they look more like teachers, so they look more like trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and consultants. So the conversations and the interactions that the correct person has with your AEs feel a lot more like free consulting and a lot less like a vendor pitch from 10 or 20 years ago. That is the key to unlocking how your account executives can get to the correct person, the correct evaluators, the correct responsible stakeholders, the correct decision maker ultimately within an organization. And we have time for one final question for today. Our final question for today is, how do I reach potential customers for data center colocation? How do you reach potential customers for data center colocation? That is a fantastic question. And what we first need to do is to figure out, what does colocation mean to your business and what does it mean to your ideal clients? because a single location co-location company has a very different business model and addressable market than a regional co-location company that has 3 or 5 different facilities spread out over a geographic region, a couple hundred miles apart from each other. And that has a very different addressable market and upside than a national or global co-location provider. So we first need to put some guardrails around the business model and your geographic presence. There also will be some things that come up around compliance, like SOC 2, PCI, HIPAA, all that stuff, depending on your target market. But let's say we're focusing primarily on size here. Not only the size of your facility and your power capacity, but how many facilities you have in geographically different areas, what efficiency rating you have, utilization rate that you have relative to grid capacity. Once you have a strong handle on how your colo stacks up against other colos regionally, nationally, and globally, you can get self-awareness about what needs to be done, about who your best potential customers are, who has the best onboarding, who has the best customer success experience, the best account and management experience, who's most likely to expand, who's most likely to give a great review, to be in a great case study. Once you know all of that, it becomes a lot more straightforward to get your client cloning machine booted up. And that's what it takes to reach potential customers. It's like, okay, we know these 3 are awesome. How do we get more like those 3? Well, you build an ideal client profile to take what those 3 best clients have in common. And then we build a target account list around companies that look similar to those 3 best clients. And then from the target account list and the ideal client profile, we figure out who the most important stakeholder is that we need to reach in each of those kinds of companies. And maybe there's a second most important stakeholder that becomes your primary and your secondary buyer persona. So then we need to figure out where they hang out online and offline and what they care about. And the better job we can do with arriving as early as possible in their buyer's journey, so we can educate and build trust with them long before they're looking for an individual company or even a category of co-location. They just have a goal they're trying to figure out. They have a question they need the answer to. They have a challenge that's freaking them out, that's stressing them out, that's causing them to have to work all-nighters, miss important life cycle events with their family. It's messing with their personal life. The better job we can do with introducing them to how others in similar companies have powered through this, how they've thought about it, unique insights on better ways to do it, long before they're looking for a solution category or looking for a company. That's how we build loyalty as trusted advisors, teachers, consultants, and subject matter experts. And 5 or 10 years ago, it used to be a nice to have to do this, because 5 or 10 years ago, the buyer's journey was 56% of the way over before we got to meet prospects. That was CEB, Corporate Executive Board, Gartner, that was putting that information out there. Now, fast forward just a few years after that, we're now at 83 and 83% and even accelerating faster. What that means, 83% of their buyer's journey is over before they're open to talking with someone from your sales team. 83%. That means, let's put it in sports analogies: football match, football game, soccer match, basketball game. You're in the 4th quarter before you get to meet the prospect. You're in the 4th quarter before you're allowed into the stadium. You're in the 8th, almost the 9th inning of the baseball game before you're allowed to talk to that prospect, if you keep doing it the way you've always done it. We can't. We're not going to survive if we keep doing it the way we've always done it. What's important is to recognize where we're at and what we need to do going forward. And in order to gain mind share and to build these relationships going forward, you can have the most fantastic cabana party poolside in Las Vegas that has ever been known in the history of Las Vegas. You could have the most epic golf tournament. The problem is they leave there. And how are you going to be top of mind for the next 364 days till you have another epic cabana party poolside in Las Vegas or another epic golf tournament? What's going to happen those other 364 days when they still have goals they're trying to figure out, when they still have challenges that are driving them nuts, that are keeping them away from their kid's soccer game or graduation or key life cycle events? What are you going to do? You're going to lean into how they figure things out, how they're figuring things out, search, chatbots, asking questions on social media, watching shorts, watching webinars, watching podcasts, looking at reviews. And the more self-aware you are that there's 28 places that you need to land between initial problem and making a purchase, the better job you do at showing up in those 28 places in awareness and consideration and decision, the more likely it is that you will reach those potential customers. The more you arrogantly call it in and pretend like it's still like it was 5, 10, 20 years ago, the more you're going to be outmaneuvered by people that are showing up in the modern digital buyer's journey. So that's what's most important to be thinking about when it comes to reaching potential customers for data center co-location. So that is the final question that we're going to address today on this week's episode of Data Center Sales, Marketing, and Go-to-Market Q&A, the live stream. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and I wish you great success at doing what you need to get done to elevate the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of your data center related business. Until next time, take care now.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.